Hi everyone. For the past few months, we deliberately focused on providing a reprieve from COVID and quarantine talk, but with everything that's happened recently, saying nothing just isn't sufficient. All of us at Board Game Barrage want to express our solidarity with the Black community.
Black Lives Matter. And while it's easy to feel helpless, remember that you can support the cause from anywhere in the world by donating money, boosting marginalized voices both online and off, and by simply listening to what people of color are saying about their perspectives on racism in America.
You can hear those perspectives right now and take action right now. There are so many people online doing the emotional labor of finding, creating, and sharing resources on how you can help, where to donate, who to follow, and how to educate yourself on fighting against racism and working towards long-term change.
Frankly, if your views are opposed to anything we've said here, we'd rather you not listen to our podcast. Racism has no place in this community or country. Black Lives Matter. Thank you for listening, and please stay safe.
They say the truth is the number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hiding there, you're busy, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud there will never be me, but they're the main.
Hello and welcome to episode number 125 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I'm here with my friends, the Orange and Green Tank. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
What does it feel like to lose all the time, friends?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, never done it once.
Today on...
I will say this.
Yes.
I noticed that we make a point of never mentioning when Neelan wins any of the games we're playing, so we'll be correcting that in today's episode.
In the solo section, and in Neelan's solo section.
Yeah, exactly.
125 is a big deal, right?
It is.
Yeah, it's slightly less of a big deal than 100 or 200, or even 150, but it's there. It's in the ballpark.
Didn't we promise like a 100 spectacular?
We did, yeah, that never happened.
Wait, that was our top 50, right? That's pretty
No.
Well, no, we were supposed to do like a 2-year anniversary episode,
right,
which
right,
kind of
right.
came and went.
Yeah.
I'd love to call it spectacular.
I mean, the whole COVID thing did start right around our 2-year anniversary.
That's true,
so.
yeah.
Yeah. Today on the podcast, we're going to be covering REimaginings, Remasters, Relocked, Reloaded, all the different re's that you can be in a board game today. And that doesn't include reprints. Everything but reprints. That's a title, huh?
Yeah. Everything but reprints.
I feel like there's a quippier way to do this, guys. Like Relocked, Reloaded, you know.
Yeah. If the Matrix sequels proved anything, that you just add Reloaded and Revolutions to the end of your titles and you've got instant magic, so...
See, you're holding out on me.
Wait,
Okay.
that was good stuff?
Well, before the episode, we talk about what the topic is. You
that
had
just
the
came to me.
Matrix trilogies.
I can't be
You didn't want the
responsible for
host to
saying-
shine in his episode to have that ready. You got that ready.
Look,
you wrote that down.
If I just shine in the moment off the top of my dome, that's on me. This stuff can't be planned.
But before we get to our feature topic of the day, we will talk about the board games that we have been playing. Neelan, why don't you tell us about a game that you played by yourself and therefore a game that you have won?
Yeah.
Hopefully. He might not have won it.
That's like, it would be embarrassing if I didn't run this one. No. The game that I've been playing is another... Well, it's actually not strictly a solo game. This is Cities Skylines, which was sent to us as a review copy. This is by Cosmos. Cities Skylines is a board game adaptation of a very popular video game.
Redo.
What's that?
Redo.
Rework, reimagining of a popular video game which is called Cities Skylines, which is itself a sort of take on SimCity. So what you're doing in Cities Skylines is you are a city planner working towards building a city that just starts as sort of city districts of grass and roads and nothing else, and you're putting in commercial districts and residential districts and services. And what you're trying to do is build a successful city over the course of the game. The game is basically one of hand management, where at the start of the game, you have a bunch of cards that represent the things that you can put in your cities. So you might have a card that says residential zone, and that card will say, if you were to place this residential zone, it would cost this much, it would boost your pollution by this much, it would cost you this much power. So every card you play puts a tile into your city and then modifies a track. It's sort of a game of tracks on tracks and tracks, where you just have a pollution track and a population track and a electricity track and a crime track. And it's just about using your cards effectively to manage those at the appropriate times. If that sounds kind of straightforward, It's because it kind of is. There's not really that much going in this game as I would have liked. The cards kind of boil down to pretty simply modifying one or multiples of those tracks and keeping them all in balance at the appropriate time is kind of the whole game. The thing that's marginally interesting about this is you may not be able to play a card because if you say your crime track gets to the end of the scale, you can't then play another card that would boost it again. So you could get into positions where you're sort of locked out from being able to do anything, and sort of keeping the game going by playing cards at the appropriate time, because you play a card and then immediately draw a card, is kind of what the whole game is. But I kind of found it got sort of stuck in this rut of, okay, I can see the ideal combination of cards to play, but there's one link missing because some cards require other services to be in your city before they get the most effect out of them. So you're kind of sometimes just being like, okay, I'm just going to play these other less good cards and hope that the next card I get kicks off this chain I want to do. I thought that was just pretty frustrating from a design perspective. It also just runs too long. It's a 2-hour game that I think would be somewhat mitigated by playing it as a cooperative game, but it's also the sort of cooperative game where you're just basically collaborating on decisions. It's basically multiplayer solitaire in like the truest sense. Like there's not that much individual decision making. Like the ideal way to play the game would be to look at what everyone's cards are, which the game says just put face up on the table and be like, oh, we should do that, then we should do that, then we should do that. So it's kind of basically a solo game, and honestly not an especially good one. I can't say I would recommend this. I'm a big proponent of these sorts of video games, like these city planning games. It doesn't feel like them. Like the tile laying element where you're sort of trying to fit districts together is half there. And when all you're doing is playing a card and moving a marker up and down, it just feels pretty hollow.
What would be a good replacement?
Oh, for this, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what other like solo polyomino games I can even think of. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
So, Nealon, do you think this needs a rework, or are you going to ask for a refund?
I think a refund in this case. Yeah, I don't think there's much saving this. The one thing I also want to say is like the production on this is kind of bizarre. Like the pieces aren't cut nicely. Some of the tokens aren't double-sided or have these weird, large, irregular borders around them. It's just kind of a mess. I don't think it looks good either. Yeah.
How much money do you think we could get for a refund of a review copy?
I don't know. We should ask him and see what they say.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the tiles, like the little cardboard chits, and they've got like little like spokes all around them. Is that an issue too?
No, that's just how badly they're cut. Yeah, they just have like serration around the edges of them.
Yeah,
and for a game where you're fitting polyominoes together, that's pretty bad. Good. That's all I have to say about City Skylines, unfortunately. Definitely wouldn't recommend it.
Recommend it, right?
Yeah, so we're going to just do this the whole episode. Every word we can do. I love it.
Well, don't give away the gag, Neil. They haven't caught on yet. Mark and I had an opportunity to go back on game night.
A repeat?
The Board Game Geek property. They said, we don't care about Nealon. We want you two back again. And we said, okay, we'll come.
We'd like you guys to return.
Yes, that's true. And we got to play a game called Colorful. Now, Colorful is a redo of another game called, well, actually, I think re-implementation is actually what they say in the business, of a game called Match Me, What Color Is This? ?
Rolls off the tongue.
That is such a great title. Match Me, ! What color is this? ? And Colorful is a party game that is quite good. I had a really, really fun time playing this, so yeah. I'm excited to talk about it, unlike Nealon, who didn't like his game and then had no alternatives for the game when we asked him for one. In Colorful, you all have a hand of the same colors, and those colors are your standard black and white and gray, but also include weirder colors like gold and chartreuse and other colors that I don't know. Mark, color help?
There was lime. I remember lime being one of them, I think. And
silver and gold were some of the more interesting ones.
Yeah, silver. Yep.
You weren't there, Nealon. Stop pretending.
I watched. I watched your video.
Oh, over and over again?
Yeah, on repeat.
And each round you set aside some part of those colors. A couple colors are not in the round. And then everyone must give a clue. And everyone puts a card face down that relates to that clue. So it might be, well, let's just do one where Mark was a dummy. That's probably a good place to start, right, Mark?
Sure. I don't know if you'll be able to find any examples, but go ahead, try.
I can't even remember what it was now.
Well, I'll tell you one.
Yeah, you tell us, Mark.
I felt like a big time dummy with this.
So a topic would be,
Vehicles.
and then someone has to give a clue related to that category that will evoke the color so that everyone will put it down without being able to discuss it.
Right. This is my very first round of colorful. Nikki says submarine. And Dave and Lincoln are like, oh, yeah, we got it. Perfect. Great. Easy. And so I was just
Wait, what about Kellen?
Well,
I was perfect.
I think you got it wrong, too. I'm pretty sure you got it wrong.
I think Kellen
Oh,
had
I
it.
did?
If I remember, I think Kellen had it right.
There's no chance that Kelly got yellow submarine.
No, I was surprised because I was expecting him to get it wrong when I watched it, but I'm pretty sure he did.
This is impossible. I disagree with that recollection. Anyway, so
I feel like we should look it up.
while you guys look it up, Lincoln and Dave immediately say, okay, we got it, and put their cards down. And I was struggling. I didn't know what could submarine be because we had like gray and blue and, a bunch of other colors. So in the end, I settled on blue. And then much to my chagrin, once we went into the scoring phase after all the cards had been set out, when submarine came up and the cards started getting flipped, yellow kept being revealed. And obviously it's a reference to the Beatles, Yellow Submarine. I'm a huge Beatles fan, and I felt like a big moron when it didn't come up. Are you guys checking?
I checked, and it was definitely yellow, yellow, blue, yellow, yellow.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark. Who do you
got-
think I am?
You don't know anything about the Beatles.
I know everything about the Beatles. I saw
Name
the
off four
movie
Beatles.
yesterday.
Name off four Beatles.
Okay. Ringo Starr,
Okay.
Paul McCartney,
Okay. I don't even need last names. First names are fine. You got one easy and one hard.
Yoko Ono.
Oh my
Was he-
God.
Close.
Christina's
I'm-
cackling in the background says it all.
Christina, you're not in this episode. Nope. That's what I got.
You don't even have a John? John is a big one.
Oh, Lennon.
John Lennon and George.
Who's Yoko Ono?
John Lennon's wife.
Oh, that's close.
Yeah, I said close.
She was around.
She was certainly around.
Around and beloved.
Universally so. Universally beloved.
Well, anyway, so what makes colorful interesting is that sometimes your clue relates to the cards that are left. And so you actually put all the clues face down, and then you give the second clue and the third clue and the fourth clue and the fifth clue. And so a perfect score would be matching all of these. But you don't reveal them until after you've already put down all 5 of your cards. And so what that means, if someone gave the clue of blood in the first round and everyone puts down red except Mark, because Mark's an idiot, then when we get to the third round and someone says McDonald's, we know that it's yellow because we don't have our red card anymore, except for Mark, who still has his red card. So what it does is it has this cascading set of errors where if you mess up once, you're likely going to mess up again and again. And it's hilarious to see. Actually, it's painful, really. It is kind of like, oh, no, I've screwed this up.
Yeah.
We're not going to get the score anymore. Oh, no, I'm dumb.
I think the best example is exactly following on from this. Because Mark still had his yellow card, you gave, I'm already forgetting, Sinestro as the clue,
Which is a
thinking
good
that the answer was
clue.
going to be yellow, which was obviously a good clue, yeah.
Was he in the Beatles after Yoko Ono retired?
It was him and Hal Jordan.
So the scoring is a little bit whack, as all party games are. I think it is a cooperative affair until things go wrong, and then it becomes competitive, if I recall correctly. We just played it as a cooperative thing. It is hard.
Yeah.
And it also has a little bit of a generational element because, like, I didn't know who Sinestro was because I'm not an old person.
That is not a generational example, Kellen.
Sinestro?
Sinestro is...
What about Yoko Ono?
Yeah, I thought that'd be outside your wheelhouse.
Yeah, Yellow Submarine, Mark. Jeez.
Can't believe I missed that.
Had a fantastic time with Colorful. It's a small, delightful package from Jordan Draper, who does the, Japanese aesthetic games. He's based out of Japan. So a ton of fun for me in Colorful. I am seeking out a copy for my own collection, so it's definitely one I'd recommend if that sounds interesting to you at all. So if you want to watch that hilarity or Mark in his moment of weakness, where he proved he knows less about the Beatles than I do, you can find that on our homepage at boardgamebarrage.com or on Game Night's YouTube page. Mark, you like it? You like the game?
Yeah, I liked it. It's fun. It's a fun party game for sure. And like you said, the scoring is an issue, but the scoring for all party games is an issue. You just play it as a cooperative, fun, silly thing, and you have a lot of fun.
Mark, do you recommend Colorful?
Recommend. I think Colorful is resplendent, and therefore I would say yes. Don't ask for a refund. Ask for a renewal of your subscription to Colorful. That works. Be a repeat buyer to Colorful and get 2. Re-up your supply of Colorful. Get a couple more.
I was going to say let's go to a restaurant later, but then I realized it's COVID. All right, Mark, why don't you tell us about a game that we have all been playing together?
We all played the reimagining, reworked, re-implemented Maharaja, the game of palace building in India. This is a game that was just on Kickstarter. I think it closed just a couple days ago. But it's a reworking of an old Kramer and Kiesling game. They of Palaces of Carrera, Mystica. They've got a bunch of games, Cavum, Coal Baron. So they are heavyweights in the board game design industry. Kramer's the guy who came up with El Grande. So big designers. Anyway.
Big brain on Kramer.
So Maharaja is a game where you are building statues and shrines on this board depicting cities in India. We play this on Tabletopia, so if anything that we say here interests you, you can check it out yourself. The way Maharaja works is, in the physical copy of the game, you'll have a wheel with 2 dials that allow you to select the 2 actions you'll take on your turn. So this game is only 7 rounds long, and each turn you're taking usually 2 actions. Occasionally you'll be able to take a bonus action, but for the most part you'll have 2 actions. What you're trying to do is you're trying to travel around to the various cities, placing shrines and statues, which give you worship points, which indicate the amount of area you control you have in the various cities. And you know which city is scoring next based on a track that is at the bottom of the board. So, for example, you'll know that the green city is going to score now, but in future turns, the yellow city is due up next, and then the pink city, and then the orange city. So you'll have an idea of how the cities are meant to be scoring. So you'll be trying to place statues and shrines in those cities to have area majority and score the most points and get the most money at the end of every round. You get that area majority by placing statues, which you can place in various spots in the city, or place shrines in the city. You can also place shrines along the roads that connect one city to the other. Why that is necessary is because in order to travel from one city to the next, there must be shrines in every village along that path. So most roads have 2 sets of villages. And in order to cross a road, both villages must be occupied by your shrines or by opponent's shrines. Now, if you have one of your shrines in any of the villages, you can pass through at no cost. If your opponents are the only people to have shrines in villages, you must pay them in order to pass through. So if I'm trying to cross a road and in the first village I have a piece, I can pass through at no charge. But if in the next village, Kellen and Neelan have pieces, I have to pay both of them 1 coin each to pass through. So you are using your actions to move around the cities, and you can also take an action to manipulate that city track in order to have cities that you already have an area majority score again. So for example, if early in the game, the green city was early to score, and I placed a bunch of statues and a bunch of shrines in there, and I had a clear majority, one thing I could do on my turn is, after it scored, I could use an action to move green back up so it scored again. This was an aspect of the game I found interesting because it costs a lot in order to take that action to move your city back up to score again, but it can be quite rewarding if you've built up a stronghold and want it to come back up.
It costs a lot in the sense that you literally have at most 14 actions in the game, and it takes one of your actions to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's right.
There's no payment for it.
Exactly. And so at the end of every round, and again, everybody will take 2 turns on their turn per round, so the rounds move fairly quick, there's a scoring. And what you're doing in the scoring is you're seeing who has the area majority based on the number of statues and shrines they have in any city. The person who has the most control in the form of worship points gets the largest cash reward and also a bonus. And then the person in second place and third place and so on scores lesser and lesser amounts. You do that for 7 rounds, and then at the end, there's a final scoring where area majority is again tallied for all 7 cities, which is also another interesting aspect to the game. So that is Maharaja. What did you guys think of Maharaja?
I liked it. I think that there are some elements that I typically like, such as the simultaneous play aspect, where you're planning out your actions and then you just reveal them as you're doing them. And I tend to like that as something that sort of speeds up and adds an element of doublethink. I know Kellen and I disagreed about this over the course of playing it, but I like that process of, oh, what do I think is going to be the most valuable thing for Kellen to do here? And how do I either get ahead of that? One of the things that happens in the game is that turn order can change. There's an action that gives you access to these characters that you can swap, and they will dictate the turn order. So you might be thinking like, okay, I can use one of my actions to make sure that I have going first in the subsequent round, or I might like being at the tail end because I can get like the drop on cities at the end of a round. But that's one of your actions just to change that turn order. So like Kellen suggested, in a game with only 14 actions, that's a pretty big decision. If you want to devote half of your turn to just moving flags, then you're not putting pieces on the board. I liked that core. There are things I want to do, but what is the most important thing I can do now based on what I think Kellen and Mark are going to be doing?
That weight to that decision of like, if I'm going to use one of my valuable actions, like use like this big amount of tempo to change things, like, is it worth it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, weighing that out.
I really bounced hard off of Maharaja, perhaps more than any Euro we've played in years. I think that there was something to do with the combined effect of such a limited action. So it was very deliberate in what you were able to do. And then there was a ton of bluffing and doublethink and character powers that had to be layered onto that, to the point that if you got at the wrong moment, you just had no... It wasn't a freewheeling, fun affair. It was a very deliberate pace. I do this, then I do this, then I do that, combined with character powers with different initiative orders. It felt like we took what was fun and interesting about a game like literally Citadels and then put an entire Euro wrapper around it that was unnecessary for me.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, I enjoyed my play of it, but I didn't leave that game clamoring to get a copy necessarily. It didn't wow me to such an extent that I thought it'd be a game that I like needed to add to my collection. I think it's solid and I enjoyed it. And I like the brevity of it. I like it's just 7 rounds and 2 turns. That was all appealing. And there are aspects I like. I liked the weight of the tempo changes and the ability to rescore a city. But yeah, it didn't, knock my socks off.
And I love games with player powers where you do this and I do that. But in this specific instance of a game, the majority of the game took place with Mark having a power where he scored even if he had no presence in a city, and Neelan didn't have to pay the costs of traversing the map to get anywhere, which rendered what was a substantial portion of the game, which is placing your pieces and route building to block people and get income, it rendered it completely meaningless. So it was like we were all taking these turns at the beginning, like this is Hansa Teutonica, and like, oh, I'm going to go there, and now you're going to pay me. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter. We only ended up paying each other, I think, on like 3 or 4 turns out of every turn in the game. And that was substantially deflating for me.
Yeah, it's like I saw a good power and used it to win that game, and it just felt like a pretty strong play. But I can see your objection to that. In all honesty, though, I do think that it did lead to a weird game where there does feel to be like the game wants to have the route building be a substantial portion of the game. And in our game, we had 2 powers, in fact, that kind of negated that. And that did feel a little bit wonky. But something I want to stress is that those character tiles are variable in the sense that you could randomize them. You could just pick the ones that you think work best in the game. And that's never ideal. I know we tend towards saying, well, you should have the powers in the game that you think make for the best game. And those should be the ones that you put player forward. So it's never great to put the onus on players to figure out the players that make that game shine. But yeah, it certainly wasn't a case of, oh, well, if these powers suck, then what can you do? Because you could just literally take those out. Something I wanted to mention was that this version was also had some development work by Simone Luciani. And it was one of the things I found the most appealing about the game conceptually, because he's one of the designers of Tolkien, which is one of my favorite games. And I was kind of a little bit surprised to find out afterwards, like how much influence he had on like actually changing some things about the game that I hadn't expected. So the game in its original form doesn't have victory points at all.
Neelan.
Hello?
Do you know how a podcast works?
No.
Is we start, we say hello, we cover the games that we played, and then the host says something clever, yada, 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 Matrix trilogy, and then converts that to the feature topic. Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
Do you see what you're doing right now?
I see what I'm doing.
What are you doing right now?
I'm getting us straight into the feature topic. Kellen,
but
please. But
you can't. What do you think you're going to introduce me to introduce the feature topic
take it away.
now?
Segue us into the feature topic. The floor is yours.
So what has led us to our featured topic today, which is on reimaginings, redos, rethemes, and re, is what had changed in Maharaja, and how that was an interesting discussion for us that we wanted to rehash here together with you guys. Nice. So, Neelan, why don't you...
But before we rehash it, I want to say you've got a couple of days left when you hear this to enter the math trade. The math trade is going to be wrapping
register.
Up. Register now.
God.
Register now and join the math trade at boardgamebarrage.com/trade. It's ending on Sunday the 7th. We have a YouTube video on how to join the trade. All your questions will be answered on that video. So boardgamebarrage.com/trade to join. The math trade ends Sunday the 7th. This is going to be a beginner-friendly math trade, so join and have fun and get games. Kellen, the floor is yours.
No, you guys can't do this. That's not how this works. Oh my gosh. This is not good.
I concede my...
No, you're not conceding anything.
I concede my remaining time to the gentleman from wherever you're from.
Wow. So, Neelan, why don't you explain sort of the difference in Maharaja 1.0 versus what we played, which I think segues really well into what a reimagining is.
Yeah, so I was interested in looking up what the differences were because I made a sort of a point of not learning anything about the original game when I was learning the revised game. So this was developed from the original with some help by Simone Luciani of Tolkien fame. And what I was surprised to discover, well, actually not that surprised, because funnily enough, I sort of offhandedly said during the game that the victory point bittiness of it was something that I associate with the Italian designers. And I was surprised to discover that it wasn't in the original game at all. There are no victory points in the original version of Maharaja. It's a game that is purely a race game where whoever gets to their 7th statue first wins the game, with the tiebreaker being money. So it's much more about winning the area control with your statues just to get more money, to get cascade of statues faster and faster. What the new version does is it gives you points with, whether you're landing on bonuses, there are favorite tiles that can get you bonuses, there are characters that can give you victory point bonuses. So it kind of dilutes a little bit of what felt like the purity of the design of the original. Obviously, I can't say that without having played it, but it actually made me more interested to go back and play the original game because I liked the core of what Maharaja was doing, but it didn't feel like one of those games that I was necessarily crazy excited for. So this kind of felt to me like I don't know, maybe on like my first bluff, like a unneeded re-implementation, at least for my tastes.
Yeah, I would like to play the original because I feel like from the reading of the rules, they sound like they'd be quite different, and I'd like to give it a spin.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a reimagining of Maharaja, a new version coming out from a game that came out in 2004 to a new version in 2020. And so I think, we can't speak for the designers or the publishing house, but, the reason that they do that is because they say, hey, this had something interesting in it. There was something cool about Maharaja. Now let's reimagine that for modern audiences and tastes. So I think the first question I just wanted to do a roundtable with the three of us is, do we think that is interesting? Do we like the concept of reimaginings? And I can start because maybe you'll both say yes. Like, for some reason, this bothers me just a smidgen. It's like, the game is good. The game is from 2004. It's not even that old. And I think when you translate this concept to like video games or like remastering or upgrading the graphics, it suddenly makes sense to me. But when you position it like a board game, it feels like what may have happened to Maharaja is that it was rough and harsh. And then they're like, well, let's add victory points to everything that you do. And, even if you don't get the statue, you're going to get some victory points. And that's what the modern people want. And that's what's going to be good in this day and age. So Maharaja may have been better as a straight reprint, an upgrade to the theming or the color and the artwork that is sort of a direct translation of how it works in video gaming. But when you told us this, I was just like, man, that's a bummer. And that was my initial hot take on this.
Right. And it kind of feeds into like, there are examples of this having done in a way that I don't want to say is more correct, but at least differently. Like, I feel like Brass sort of tried to have it both ways by sort of saying, well, here's the remake of the original, and here's how we would update it for 2020. And I think that's such a smart way to do this. And it kind of bums me out that they didn't do that for Maharaja. Like, I would have loved to have seen this bright, vibrant, colorful version of the original as an option as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Neil. And so you're talking about the Roxley versions of Brass and the new edition with Brass Birmingham. So There's Brass Lancashire, which was basically the original Brass game, but with like a new coat of paint, for lack of a better phrase. Just upgraded the art and the components, and just for the people who are looking for the original Brass game, which is a beloved game, it was just a new, incredibly nice version of that game. But what the designers did, who are huge Brass fans, I remember hearing an interview with them, and they have been playing the game for a long time. They played it hundreds of times. So they just took those ideas that they had from playing the originals so many times and created Brass Birmingham, which is a game that shares a lot of DNA with Brass, but adds a new resource, which is beer, which is a resource that is accessible from anywhere on the board, and it just causes the game to be a little bit different in terms of how you play. And so it's sort of like Brass Birmingham became like an official variant, for lack of a better term. It became like a variant that this group of Brass fans who were devotees produced, and I think now there are people who are still huge fans of the original Brass and Brass Lancashire, and there's a lot of fans that have switched to being bigger fans of Brass Birmingham.
I think it's just interesting, right, how clean or messy this process can be with board games. And one of the things that I find is that I want there to be a very definitive way to play something. And so when they say, well, this is just like your favorite game, except we've done this, this, and this, I go, how is that even the same game? You know, I look at like Kemet, which has gone through so many like reiterations where it's like, here's Kemet, here's the Kemet expansion, here's Kemet 1.5, which changes how turn order works, and now here comes the new Kickstarter, Blood and Sand. And so I think in a way Kemet is being a little bit consistent and saying that this new one is the definitive way to play.
Right.
And I like that as opposed to sort of splitting the difference and saying, well, let's just release both. But at the same time, is Kemet still Kemet when you change the turn order? Because that has dire consequences or very drastic differences in how the game is played. I think that acknowledging reimaginings has this like thought that it's like, if we take out the semi-co-op part of Archipelago and re-release Archipelago again, like it's not Archipelago anymore. And yet they call it Archipelago, you know, Care Bear Edition.
Yeah.
And this isn't like I want my game this exact, you know,
right.
I have that game, so it still exists, but it's just, how do you go about doing, you know, do you do it like Twilight Imperium does it, right? Where they just do additions, Twilight Imperium 3 and 4. I think Twilight Imperium and Cosmic Encounter and games like Wiz War just do like very definitive additions and versions, and that's another clean way to do that.
Yeah, it feels like with Kemet, I've seen the Kemet thing as a sort of refinement. In my mind, the designers of Kemet...
Another reword.
That's right, exactly. The designers of Kemet are getting closer to what they want. It feels like with that game, it's like with the 1.5 rules, even by calling it 1.5 rules, it feels like they're saying like, this is an improvement. Like we're getting closer to what we want.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas with Brass is sort of a weird one because Brass, I feel like both games stand on their own, but they're obviously super shared, but they feel like different. And then there's games like Caylus where, you know, you have the original Caylus and you have this Caylus 1303, and that feels like a whole different game. It feels like a 2.0 where the DNA is not nearly as shared as it is with the two Brass games.
That's an interesting example because, and I think you would know better than me, Mark, how has like the response been to the new Caylus? Do people like universally like it better, or is it pretty divided?
It's funny. I don't think there's a universal acclaim or a universal acknowledgement that Caylus 1303 is better or worse. But one thing that has been interesting about the whole Caylus thing is that I felt like, because Caylus was one of my favorite games, and so when Caylus 1303 was announced, I was looking at people's responses to the rule books and to even just the idea of Caylus being redone, not just reprinted, but redone. And there was a lot of negative stuff. A lot of people saying, oh, I don't like this about the rules. You know, don't mess with Caylus. Caylus is great. What are you doing? I quite enjoyed the newer version. And so I wanted to see what other people thought of it. And there seems to be a lot of people who like the new one more, but there's not a backlash. I feel like there's people who've been saying like, oh, I prefer the original Caylus for good reasons. I think there are things that have been changed from the original Caylus that I agree with them with, but the backlash hasn't been nearly as aggressive or as negative as I thought. I think a lot of times when there's a reprint, people hold those old classics so dearly that, you know, a redo offends them or makes them angry, but there hasn't been that with Caylus for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think another good one, and this maybe illustrates my point really cleanly, is you have a game that is universally loved, Terra Mystica, right? It comes out, And you're like, wow, that'd be interesting to play. I want to check out Terra Mystica, and that's fantasy themed. And then you hear that Gaia Project is coming out, which is the science fiction version of Terra Mystica. And then you're like, okay, so what they've done is they've refined the game somewhat. They've changed it to sci-fi to maybe try to broaden the appeal. Okay, great. So now I'm going to try Gaia Project. I don't need to try Terra Mystica. And then they're like, oh, no, wait, we're going to keep making expansions for Terra Mystica, but not for Gaia Project. But Gaia Project is a refinement of Terra Mystica. And so now, as an outsider who's played half a game of Terra Mystica in my life, I'm like, well, which one is the definitive experience? Because the scaffolding is 80% of the same thing. And so I sit in the middle and don't do anything.
And that's actually a good example where there are still, I mean, there are a ton of fierce proponents of Terra Mystica over Gaia Project, because there are changes that kind of reduce, the on the board fighting for space component of Terra Mystica. So it does feel subtly different, even though, like, to my eyes, it is a straight up improvement. That is an interesting one where it's not quite clear which product even is the correct one to, purchase and support at this point.
It gets to the heart of a board game as this experience or art form or film, as I often compare it to, where you can't tell me that, like, well, if you like sci-fi, it's that one. And if you like fantasy, it's that one. It's like one of them is better. Like, one of them has to be better. And so I need to suss that out before I can engage. Now, that's not really true. Let's be honest with each other. I know that's absurd and in my head, but it feels that way. And there is a definitive experience in the Gaia Mystica universe, and I need to know what it is.
Yeah, I think that to contrast that with something like Through the Ages as well, where when a new story of civilization comes out and, it's substantially more incremental than something like Gaia Project, but, it's a slight revision to the rules. It sort of streamlines a few things, changes some rules here and there. And I don't think there's anyone arguing that Through the Ages was better before those changes. Like, it's straight up the game that you should be playing is a new story of civilization. And it kind of felt like that doesn't happen that often, where there is a different but universally almost accepted superior version.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder if the naming of it, if they called it second edition, if you then might have people saying first edition, because I know that happens a lot with Twilight Imperium, where they prefer the third edition to the fourth edition by labeling it a new, like it's like the same name, but with the word new added to it. It's like the Nintendo DS or, the new 3DS or whatever.
Where it's more of they're clearly saying this is the better version. Yeah.
And so the last game that I wanted to bring out is Dune, one of my favorite board games that I've ever been able to play. Dune was released originally in 1979. The only one of us alive was Mark, and he was about 25 at that time. The days of Yoko Ono and company.
I remember, that's right.
And Dune is known as a fantastic, asymmetric strategy game for 6 people, negotiation heavy, heavily themed in the universe of Dune, and a slugfest, and a similar grand strategy version perhaps of Cosmic Encounter, or a very hyper-focused version of Cosmic Encounter. And it's long been a cult classic. And when we got word that Gale Force 9 was bringing it back in 2019, there was a ton of excitement because the game had different rules and optional variants and advanced versions and tournament rules. And the process of reading through the rule book, I had a print and play copy of the game and figuring out, should I use the advanced Karama powers, or should we use advanced combat or double spice blow? There were so many specific nuances that I had no clear understanding of what to do, and should I use the tournament rules? And so when the new game came out, I was like, this is great. We can latch onto as a community what the rule set should be for Dune. They can refine it just a little bit. They can just make it. And instead, they left it. They left the advanced game in the rule book and left the basic game there for people to sort of choose between them. They did clarify some things and simplify a little bit of it, but rather than taking a stand and saying, this is the definitive Dune game, they played the card of saying, well, here's a basic game and here's an advanced game. And we talk about playing Dune again, and I still think it's going to take 2 hours of me consulting with experts, literally going online and consulting with experts and saying, how should I play Dune again? Is Fremen overpowered if we don't use advanced combat? It's just absurd to me that you can't get that right, or at least say this is the experience that you should be going for.
Why do you think it's so difficult for there to be a definitive Dune, even emerging from the tournament scene? Like, why is it so hard to figure out the best way to play Dune?
I mean, I think that it's impossible to really balance, because a lot of the balance is, your perceived balance of how it feels when you first start playing versus when you get way into it. This game has interactions on the level of, you choose which character wins and on what turn, and if that happens, you actually win. So it folds in on itself so much that I think group meta becomes a big part of it. I think that the tournament scene has done the best job based on what I've read, but that is not really as an active participant in that. That's just from my outsider perspective. But I think people have very strong opinions about what Dune is or isn't, and I was just hoping for more clarity in the rule book and online even. I was trying to devise like a hot question, and I couldn't really get to it, but it's like, Neelan, would you prefer that with the resistance? No.
Don't pretend like this wasn't just an excuse to say resistance.
Resistance. Would you be happier with a updated, beautiful $50 version of the Resistance right now, or a reimagining?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example, actually, that I'm surprised I didn't think of. I considered like including Avalon here, but that gets kind of muddy, right? Because Avalon is, back when, I would have said, the better version of the Resistance. I think having those roles is a strict improvement for my taste personally. And also you can play without them. So you get the base game plus more. But now that they have largely refocused on just adding those retroactively to the base game, I would most likely recommend people to pick up the base game, get the Hidden Agenda expansion, and then you kind of get all the things I like about Avalon. So it's kind of the Terra Mystica Gaia project situation where it's a little bit confusing now to say what the best course of action is. And I would love just a singular box that includes all the things that I consider worthwhile just in like one package. Because I do think it's a little bit of a mixed message now as to what to tell people to get when it comes to the Resistance.
Can you say the word resistance?
I refuse to.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us on all forms of social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. You can chat with us in Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can send us a voicemail. We are putting together a voicemail episode of the program. So send us a little voice message and we will respond to it live. You can tell us your favorite word in that 90-second message, and you can find that at boardgamebarrage.com/voicemail. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to Heart Society Music for the song What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. What? Christina's just laughing at me. You can go away. That would have been good if I had a word there.
Remove yourself.
You can remove well, if you feed it to me, you're going to leave that in there and make me sound dumb. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.
Bye-bye. Bye.
I'm hot. I'm ready. I want you to save me from myself, baby.
Today on the podcast, we are going to be covering re-themes. No, not re-themes. That's not true. I just got carried away already. We're going to be, what is it? Reprints. That's the word I was looking for. Uh-oh. Marnie figured out that I added a Pokemon to the math trade.
Wait, what happened?
She just messaged, the jig is up.
Oh, you just added a random Pokemon to the trade?
Well, you can... I don't understand. This Apecorn is supposed to be beginner friendly, but you can add anything you want. And so I started typing in something, and it let me add Pikachu to the math trade. I guess we could shout out to the math trade, like it's the last chance to get in.
We'll do it in the middle.
Here.
We'll do it in the
Okay.
When does it end, Mark?
Sunday.
When are we done with
No,
it?
I'm just curious.
Sunday.
We're tired of it, Mark. When is it over?
When will it be?
Sunday.
When will you stop talking, Mark? Like, when is that going to
I'm
happen?
about to start.
No,
Go on a roll.
I don't know.
1 second, I'll be right back.
Okay. I think this is going
Yeah,
good.
I think so too. God, I just got so painfully hungry all of a sudden, though. My stomach is...
Well, you might... Do you have any recipes that you could make
God,
later?
no, we're not doing that. That's gold for Mark to discover later.
Yeah, little bonus
Oh,
for Mark.
Can't wait.
All right, I just need one more
One more.
on this list. Refrigerator? No. Why am I adding it in the middle now?
Refree.
Reconfigure.
Or
Wow, these
retreat.
words are getting long. Rechroma. Do you think that people will believe that I know what rechromatographing is?
I don't believe I know what rechromatography is.
Well, let me Google that for you. Rechromatography is a repeated process or instance of what? Oh, of chromatography. Chromatography being the process of a chemical mixture carried by a liquid or gas separated into components as a result of the differential distribution of the solutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So doing that again, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Reforestation, reappointment,
Reaffirm?
recognizability, recommendation,
Recommendation is
reappearances, restrictions. Why am I restrictions? I can't even talk now. Reap, reef,
reap the benefits.
real, relay, realm.
Oh, is this gonna be your thing at the end of every episode? Just
No.
Things?
No, that's not a thing. Okay,
Your Pokemon
and
thing.
if we want to, we could start Chikorita, Bailey, I don't even have a list of that.